Hello, my name is Chris, and this is going to be the second part of our vertical shooter tutorial. In this one, we're going to give the ship the ability to shoot little shots out of it. In the first one, we made the ship move around, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we're able to push left or right, up or down on the Xbox joystick, and it'll move around. And we've also got a little bit of a roll in there. And again, we're just using PlayMaker to do all this, so it's all visual scripting. So if I click here, you can kind of see what we did. We've got getAxisVector, which gets your controller input, and a controller simple move, which moves the character controller that's on our object around. And then we've also got some barriers around it to keep your character from going off the screen, or ship, I should say. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're actually going to cover a couple different ways to have your ship shoot. The first way is going to be the wrong way, but it's the most obvious way, and you could use it. It just isn't as efficient, and then we'll show you the other way using poolers. So the first way is going to be creating and destroying objects, and the second way is going to be using poolers to activate and deactivate the object. Okay, so let's do the first way here. Let's create something that we're going to use for the shot. It's going to be a cube. Just going to zero that out. All right, so that's a little bit big to be a shot, so let's scale it down. We'll go at 0.1 on the X and Y. All right, so there's our cube. Oops. And that seems lined up just fine. Okay, so this cube needs some sort of logic in order to actually move. So first let's rename it. We'll call it shot. And then I'm going to add a PlayMaker FSM. So to do that, I'm just going to right click here in the PlayMaker editor, click add FSM. And this first state is going to just move it. So we'll call it translate. And in here, I'm going to look at the translate action over here in the action browser. I'm just going to double click that and it'll add it here. So we want to translate what object? We're going to translate the owner because it is the shot. And we're going to move it along its Z. You can see here the Z axis is pointing forward. I know that 50 is a pretty good speed for this, so I'm going to put, it's going to translate 50 per second every frame. So it's going to continually move. So if I hit play, we should just be able to see it move off the screen. So yeah, it was too fast to see it, but it just shot off. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to be creating this object on the fly and then destroying it in order to have the shot fly off and then go away eventually. So first thing we want to do is turn this into a prefab. So Unity has this idea of prefabs, which are just instances of the object. So if you drag any object from your hierarchy down into your project folder, it turns it into a prefab. I've got a folder here called prefabs that I'm putting it into. And I've already made something that we're going to use later, which is a particle hit. I didn't want to go over creating particles. That's not really part of this tutorial. So I've already created the object for that. So you can see we've got our shot down here, and it's turned it blue up here, which means that that's now an instance of the prefab, which an instance is basically just a copy that is exactly like the original. They're more efficient than just having a bunch of unique objects. Okay, so this first shot, I can actually delete it out of here, and it still resides in the project. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a child object of our ship here. So we're going to create empty child. I'll just move that up here. And we'll call this the shot emitter. And this is what's actually going to spit the little shots out. So we're going to move it to the front of the ship here. Make that a nice even number, 1.5. And then we're going to give it some logic. So this is going to be the first multi-state FSM we've created for this tutorial. So we're going to add an FSM to that. You can see it's got the icon there, so it added an FSM to it. And then down here we've got this one, which is this first state is going to wait for an input from the controller. So we'll say wait for button press. And that's just the name of that state. So over here we're going to do get button, and we'll do get button down, There's different kinds of ways to get the button. You can get button up. You can just do a get button, which gives you a bool, which is just a true or false statement variable. And so we're just going to do get button down because that'll work for us for this. It's set to fire 1. Fire 1 is in Unity, it's just defaults to the A button on the Xbox controller. So we're just going to leave it at that. And when you get button 1, we're going to send an event. So when you send an event, that's a way that you can tell one state to go to another state. You can create events here manually. So if I wanted to make a new event called shoot, all this is going to be, events are kind of the same thing as transitions with these states. So let's go back to our state. And then this event that we just created shows up here. That's the shoot one that we just put here under events. And it tells me the event's not being used right now. Well, if I click on that, it'll automatically add it here. You could also right click on the gray part, the dark gray part of the state, and go to add transition and do it here with shoot. So now I've got 2 of them, which I don't need, but I'll just delete the second one. Okay, so we're going to have this go to another state as soon as you press that button. So that's all it's saying here. When you get fire 1, which is the A button, it's going to send the event. So let's add a state. You just right click anywhere and then add another state to it. And then to connect the two, you just left click on the transition and drag it down to the other state. Okay, so now when we get to this state, this is where we're going to emit that shot that we just created. So to do that, and remember this is kind of the bad way to do it, but we're going to start this way because it's very simple to do. We're going to go to create object. So there's the state we want, or the action rather. And here it's asking, okay, what game object do you want to create? And you could click on this little drop down and then you get a list of all of the prefabs that are in your scene. So I could pick the shot here. You can also, you can see I can see the shot here under my project folder. I can just drag that in like that. Now for the spawn point, that's where it's actually going to emit from. We're going to pick this object, which is our shot emitter, and we're going to drag that in there. So now it's just going to, you press the A button, it goes down here, it shoots. We'll just give that a scripted name. And then when it's done with that, we want it to just come back up. Now this transition I created here, finished, this is a special transition. I didn't have to create it, it's already there, and it's all caps. And what that means is you don't need an action to actually call that event. It's just when it's done running through all the events that are in there, all the actions that are in that state, it just automatically, when it knows it's finished, will go back and transition back. Okay, so yeah, this should work. Let's try it out here. So you can see it's shooting out. And it's pushing me back. Now the reason why it's pushing me back is because that shot actually has its own collision on it. And every time I shoot, the collision from the shot is pushing me backwards. And that's fine. We'll fix that soon. Alright, so that works. Let me show you one other thing that's going on here that's not so good. You notice every time I shoot, over on the left-hand side, it's creating a clone of that shot, right? And it's going to do that infinitely. And these shots are just moving off in the Z direction forever. Also, probably not a good thing. And so they're just sitting there in the scene, they never go away, and that's not really something you want, because in a shooter you could have thousands and thousands of bullets. Okay, so let's fix a couple things. Let's select the shot here in our project view, and the first thing we're going to do is you can see under its inspector here, it has a box collider on it, which is fine. We don't actually need it to have its own collision though, but I'm not going to get rid of the collider. Instead, I'm going to turn it into a trigger. Now, this is going to allow me to have this shot do something else once it collides with something. Now, as soon as you turn it into a trigger, it doesn't act like a collider anymore. It won't push the ship back. At least I don't think it will. Yeah, so you can see it's not acting like a standard collider now. It's really just a trigger volume. So that means whenever it goes into something, you can then say, oh, did I trigger an event? All right, so let's go back to our shot here. And we want it to, whenever it collides with something, we want it to trigger something else to happen. So you can see here under translate, there's nothing else in here. All it does is move forward. So we're going to add another action to this called trigger event. So I just double click and it pulls it in here. And we'll say on trigger enter. So anytime something enters this trigger, we don't have a collide tag. So you can have triggers only be affected by certain other objects with a specific tag. We're just going to leave it untagged for this. So anything will be able to trigger it. We're going to send an event. So we will just create a new event. This is another way you can make events. If you just click on it and you don't have an event there, you can click on new event. And we'll call this destroy self. All right. So I just click on that and it added the event here. So let's add another state that it's going to go into. So all I did is left click and drag down to connect the two. And this one, we'll just call it destroy self. And there's actually an action that does that. Here it is, destroy self. And so what's going to happen as soon as it collides with something, it will destroy itself. It's kind of hard to show this happening, but if you look over here on the left-hand side, I did skip one step. You'll notice that it's not actually destroying itself, which is a problem. So what it should be happening right now is it should be running into collider top. This collider that I've got at the top of the screen, it should be running into that and destroying itself. The reason that's not working is because when you have a triggered object, you need to have one of the objects, either the one it's hitting or the triggered object itself, need to have a rigid body on it. Just for simplicity's sake, we'll add a rigid body to our shot. That way we don't have to worry about other colliders having a rigid body on them. So we're going to go to add component. I've already got it typed in here, but we'll put a rigid body on there. We do not want gravity to affect the rigid body on our shot. And we also don't want our shot to use physics, so I'm going to turn on is kinematic. So turn off gravity, turn on is kinematic. So now when we play, if I shoot, and you look over here on the left-hand side, once that shot hits that collider in the front, it's getting destroyed. So I'm just creating and destroying a bunch of these shots. Now to make that more obvious, I'm going to add one more thing to our shot here. We're going to have it emit a particle system each time it gets destroyed. Now to do that, I'll click on this destroy self action here, or state, and we're going to create another object here. So we're going to go back to create object, and we need to make sure this is before destroy self. If it comes after destroy self, it'll never happen. So we need to put it before that in the state. And we're going to drag our particle hit effect that I created, and we're going to put it in there. And the spawn point for that is going to be the shot itself. So the shot will drag in here for the spawn point, and I think this will work. There we go. So you can actually see the shot, once it hits that back wall, it's creating the particle system and then it's destroying itself. All right, so that's working pretty well. So this works. This is not a horrible way to do things, but in the end, what happens is whenever you create and destroy objects, eventually the Unity has to do a thing called garbage collection, where it frees up memory, I think, on the CPU. And this can cause frame rate stutters, especially on weaker hardware like cell phones and things like that. I'm not sure if you'd ever see a big issue on a PC or not. Maybe eventually you would. I think you would if you were running VR, something like that that's more processor intensive. So what we're going to do is, instead of creating and destroying these objects, we're going to pool them. Now someone, and I don't remember who, created some pooler actions for PlayMaker. And what I'll do is, I don't know where you would find these right now. What I'll do is I'll put these in a zip file or something like that that you can download, and I'll put a link there in the video when I'm done. But these are super handy, and there's just 4 actions in here. Pooler pool, what this does is you tell it a prefab to pool, and then it just creates, on runtime, like when you start the game, it creates a pool or a bunch of these instances that are loaded into the scene, and they're just brought in and they're deactivated and they're just ready to use whenever you want. And I'll show you how that works. So to keep this simple, I'm just going to create a new empty object over here. And we'll call this pooler. And this is what's going to pool our shots. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an FSM to this object, the pooler object. And here in this first state, we'll call it pool shots. And I'm going to bring that in here. So now we can pool these shots. So the prefab to pool is shot. The name of the pool, this is important because this name is how you pull them in. We'll call it shot pool. You can call it whatever you want, but just to keep it obvious, I'll call it shot pool. You can tell it how many objects you want to pool initially. Let's just say 5. This is how many deactivated objects it's going to create in your scene based on this pool. And can it grow? We'll say yeah, just in case I can shoot more than 5 shots at one time, we'll say yes, it can grow. And I'll show you how you can use this for different effects later on. And you can give it a max number of pooled objects. If you leave it at 0, it's infinite. So it would only affect things if I change that to like 1 or 2 or 3 or higher. Okay, so now we've got this object pooling these other objects. So if I hit play, you can see it immediately created these 5 clones of shot. And they're all deactivated. If you click on it, you can see up here this little checkbox. That means the object is deactivated when there's no checkbox in there. So when you stop the game, you can see those objects are gone. Okay, so now we're going to use that instead of creating and destroying objects. So I'm going to go back to my player shot emitter. And here where I get button down, that's fine. But where I shoot, I have create object. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is pooler spawn. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off create object for now. That means it's just not going to do anything. And then let me just remove it to keep it simple. So instead of creating an object, we're going to pool those objects. We're going to spawn them. So all we need is the name of the pool. Oh, I clicked on pooler destroy stored. That's not what I wanted. I want pooler spawn. There we go. So we need to put the name of the pool in here. And up here we created the name and we called it shot pool. I'll just copy that. I'll go back to my shot emitter and put that name in. The spawn point is going to be the shot emitter, and we can leave the rest of these as they are. All right, one other thing we need to change before I move on is instead of using this destroy self action in the shot, so I'm on the shot now that's here in the project scene or project view. Instead of using destroy self, we want to use pooler destroy self. And what this does is it doesn't actually destroy the object, it doesn't get rid of it, it just deactivates it again. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So when I hit play, so here's our pooled objects. And when I shoot, you can see one of them becomes active. And then when it hits the wall and it does pooler destroy self, all it does is deactivate that object. So I'm not creating and destroying a bunch of objects. And this is much more efficient than constantly creating and destroying bullets. I could do this exact same thing for the particle hit. Instead of creating and destroying those, I could just pool them, and whenever the shot destroys itself, it could just call the pool for those particle hits. Anyways, hope that's helpful. That's a really simple way to pool the objects. And like I said, I'll create a zip file of these pooler actions, and you can drag those into your Unity scene. The way you would add them is go to, let me see if I can find this real quick. So wherever your project is located, there's going to be a folder, and I've got one for the tutorial here. Whoops, didn't mean to grab that. So under my Unity projects, I've got this tutorial. You go into Assets, PlayMaker, Actions, and this is where you're going to put those pooled actions. You can just unzip the zip file in here. and then they'll compile and they'll show up here. So yeah. Anyways, that's it for part 2. In the next one, we'll actually create an enemy that you can shoot at and destroy, and we'll use the pooler for that as well, because you might have hundreds of enemies that get created and destroyed, and you don't want to have to do the garbage collection for those either. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.